all, and welcome to the Author's Armory. Today we're going to be talking about the broadsword. Now, the broadsword, this innocent-sounding word, has been misidentified and misused for many, many years. It has kind of turned into a catch-all phrase or a catch-all word to mean just about any medieval or Renaissance weapon, when in reality, it is neither of those. The broadsword is a real term for a specific sword and was never used in the medieval or Renaissance time period. Now, when I say the word broadsword, most people probably think of a weapon sort of like this, or something similar to it. This is a long sword. This is not a broadsword. A single-handed version of a sword, like similar to this, is an arming sword, or sometimes just referred to as a sword. That is not a broadsword either. Once again, the broadsword was never used in the medieval or Renaissance time period. So what is a broadsword? I'm so glad you asked. This is a proper broadsword. This is what a broadsword actually is. It's a basket-hilted weapon that started appearing on the scene at the end of the 1600s and definitely was used throughout all the 17th and into the 1800s as well. This is a specific Scottish design. The first textual reference that I'm aware of comes from 1678, where people were documenting the Scottish Highlanders using this weapon, and they called it a broadsword. That's the first time that I'm aware of that the term exists in text. There is a version of this that is sharp on one side and blunt on the back edge, and that's referred to as a backsword. But this is the true broadsword. All right, so the antique broadswords, or very accurately made replicas like this one, usually run somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2.8 to 3.5 pounds. So they're quite light. A lot of the weight is in the hand. They got this basket in the hand, which makes the tip very nimble. Now, this is a double-edged weapon, but it usually ranges somewhere in about the 38 to 42 inches in length from the pommel to the tip. And the blade itself is about 2 inches across, and then, of course, tapers down to the point. Some of those, that taper will vary from blade to blade depending on the time period and the region and the choice of the person who wants the sword to begin with. So this is kind of the look and the statistics of an actual, real broadsword. All right, so if you're writing something and that's based in history or based on an actual event, or even writing historical-based fiction, having the correct terminology is always a good thing. Sure, not everybody's going to know the difference between a real broadsword and the generic term broadsword that many people have used over time, but the people who do know will be much more impressed with your research, and people who don't know will be enlightened by what you have offered them. So that's always a good thing. But if you're writing something fantasy or completely fiction-based, where does that leave you? Of course, if it's your world and your creation, you can use whatever you want. I always encourage people, if they want to, go ahead and make up your own terminology if you want, and then use your descriptive text to describe the nature of the weapon itself. So that way you don't have to rely on earth-based terminology and terms. All right. But the other thing to think about is that if you can use more accurate or more realistic based information, you're teaching people, you're teaching them something new, and you're breaking away from the old tropes and standards that have been set up previously. So occasionally when I'm discussing this topic with other writers or possibly directors or fight choreographers in relation to the word broadsword, many times I'll receive the argument from them, well, the average person doesn't know, so what's the point? Or they're not going to get it, the audience is dumb. And I personally feel that anytime you're using something generic or worse, inaccurate, because you assume that the audience isn't interested or at worst stupid, that's headed down a path that I personally don't like. I would much rather assume that my audience is smart, assume that my audience is well-read, or at the very least that they're going to be interested in accurate information and learning new things. That's the path that I think I would rather tread. And I think a lot of us, when you really think about it, that's the side of things that you would much rather be on. So I'd encourage people to use correct terminology, or at least be informed as to what the weapon actually is, so that when you make up your own creations or perhaps term your own weapons, you're not relying on incorrect information or incorrect terminology to make those choices. So I hope you've enjoyed this discussion on the term broadsword, and perhaps later we'll get more into some of the fighting techniques and the actual strategies that people use to fight with this weapon. All right, having a good one, and I hope you've enjoyed the Author's Armory.